Hello, my name is Dan Colgan, and I am the organist and music guy here at Gloria Lutheran Church in Olympia, Washington. Today is February 27th, and the hymn I would like to look at is Jesus Still Lead On, number 624 in our red ELW hymnals. This is the sending hymn used in worship tomorrow. The text of this is by Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf, who lived from 1700 to 1760. Zinzendorf was born in Dresden, Germany, to a wealthy family. He has quite the life story, and I want to thank Paul Westermeyer for laying out much of this in the hymnal companion to the ELW, some of which I am about to paraphrase. Zinzendorf belonged to one of the most ancient of noble families in Lower Austria. They were feudal lords and very, very wealthy. During the Reformation, they became Lutherans, but they decided to take that one step further, and thus Zinzendorf was raised as a Lutheran pietist. Now, Lutheran pietism was a movement which began in the late 1600s, mainly based on the teachings of Philip Spener, a Lutheran theologian, and Nicholas Ludwig's godfather. Spener emphasized personal transformation through spiritual rebirth and renewal, individual devotion, and, piety. It's said that from the age of 6, Zinzendorf would write prayers and love letters to God, and then cast them out of his tower window and watch them scatter onto the ground below. He would also hold daily devotions and prayer time. There's a story that at one point, enemies from a neighboring territory were attempting to attack the castle, and they walked in a young Zinzendorf's spoken prayer session. They were so moved by this boy praying that they were brought to their knees and called off their attack. We do know for sure that around the age of 10, Zinzendorf organized the Order of the Grain of Mustard Seed at his school to, quote, convert the heathen, end quote. He later went on to pursue a law degree and eventually became a counselor at the court of Saxony in Dresden. He proceeded to buy the Berthelsdorf estate in Saxony, naming it Herrnhut, or Hut des Herrn, meaning under the protection of the Lord. Around this time, he began to grow tired of what he called the dry Lutheran orthodoxy of the period. Essentially, he felt like the church was growing further and further apart from its mission. So he began a quest to find the historical Christ, seeking to recapture the practices and spirituality of the apostolic church, the church when Christ was still on earth. The major thing that came out of this was that he soon began to grant asylum to persecuted Moravian refugees. Soon, others followed from different faiths, and Herrnhut in the village around it became known as a place of religious freedom, where none were persecuted for their beliefs. But this 18th century Mayberry didn't last very long. Discord based on these beliefs and personality conflicts soon arose. The founder of the village even called Zinzendorf the, quote, beast of the apocalypse for bringing in so many different peoples of different faiths. So Zinzendorf receded back to his manor, but continued to offer asylum to Moravian refugees there. In 1723, he married a countess, Erdmuth Dorothea. The wedding was described as combative, based on a mutual decision to strive for mutual goals, rather than for convenience or for love. But they did have 12 children, so I guess it mustn't have been too bad. She also knew how to run a country, so running a pietistic Moravian fellowship was a breeze. And with her help, Zinzendorf grew Herrnhut into a proper settlement of over 600 people. He eventually became their bishop. Zinzendorf was not only a theologian, but a musician as well. He would have an hour-long daily hour of song where he and his people would sing for an hour every day. He was also known to preach sermons in song, where he would string together 20 or 30 different hymns about a sermon topic and sing them with his people. Sometimes he was even known to improvise hymns on the spot, singing line after line to the congregation and having them sing it back to him. However, this Moravian Church of Refugees was a new thing, and not everyone was a fan. He was soon banished from Saxony for preaching what the leaders at the time called false doctrine. But that didn't stop him. He saw it as an opportunity to continue his apostolic mission and went on to found Moravian colonies elsewhere in Germany and in England, Holland, Scotland, as well as the West Indies. He even came to America in a failed attempt to merge the Lutherans and the German Reformed Christians in Pennsylvania. He eventually received permission to return back to Herrnhut and died penniless, devoting his entire fortune to his religious pursuits. All throughout his life and ministry, he had an emphasis on freeing slaves and having denominations and people of different beliefs work together and respect each other. I should also mention that during his life, he published gargantuan hymnals. The first was in 1735 while at Herrnhut, and it contained 999 hymns, and a second one later toward the end of his life in 1754 contained 3,265 hymns in 2 volumes. This is where our hymn text for today comes in. Jesus Still Lead On is actually a composite of 2 different hymns, Selig Bräutigam, O du Gottes Lamm, of 11 verses written in 1721, 2 years before he got married, and Glanz der Ewigkeit Gott und Herr der Zeit of 15 verses written in 1725, 2 years after he was married. A Moravian editor and acquaintance, Christian Gregor, combined these 2 hymns about 18 years after Zinzendorf's death, and that was then translated into English in 1846, which is the hymn we have today. The tune of this is likely one that was familiar to Zinzendorf, composed in 1698. I know this was a long biographical sketch today, but Zinzendorf is a very, very important and fascinating theological figure of the 18th century, and one that just isn't too often talked about. My takeaway from this is that Zinzendorf had some huge successes and some absolute spectacular blunders. His projects were just often misunderstood, but that never stopped him in his pursuits. To his nature and the kind of person that he was, it's been said that he was easily influenced by strong and vehement feelings, and he was easily moved both by sorrow and joy. But he was a charismatic speaker, and though he often dressed plainly, his personal appearance gave him an impression of distinction and force. So thank you for spending the time with me on this. Since you now have some idea of his life and context, I would like to read just a couple of verses of our hymn today. This is verse 1. Jesus still lead on till our rest be won. And although the way be cheerless, we will follow calm and fearless. Guide us by your hand to the promised land. If the way be drear, if the foe be near, let no faithless fears o'ertake us. Let not faith and hope forsake us. Safely past the foe, to our home we go. And the last verse. Jesus still lead on till our rest be won. Heavenly leader still direct us. Still support, console, protect us. Till we safely stand in the promised land.